Hello, this is Shilpa here. Today I'm going to talk about this whole idea of a constitutional remedy and how it can have two separate sides to it, and the way it's expressed in the patient, and how you can actually help find the common hinge between these different constitutional expressions in a person so that you don't miss out the real person within the remedy. So this is a little girl. She came with a vitiligo patch below her right eye. It was around 1 centimeter in diameter, and it had developed in the last 2 weeks. Otherwise, she was quite healthy. There were no other complaints. So the mom's a bit worried about it, and this little one is playing around in the consulting room, and the mom talks about her. So she provides a few details regarding her physical generals. So she has craving for meat, orange bars, ice cream, cold drinks, and she has this aversion to sweets. Another peculiar thing was there were lots of there was a hairiness on the hands and also on the back. And the mom describes her emotionally, and she says she's very outgoing. She plays with kids a couple of years older to her. She gets along very well with older kids, and she talks a lot. And she's very, very close to her family, like her maternal grandfather and even other family members. She has this very strong attachment to them. And I observed her, and this was a really happy child, very lively, very engaging. Talks in a mature way. She'll come to you, tell you about certain things, talk about the drawing she's making. So the mom says she just starts talking with anyone. It's like she doesn't need introduction or even strangers. Like, if there is at school, she will directly go into the principal's office if the teacher is not around and complain something like, I'm not getting my turn on the swing. And she says she's not scared of anything. Now the mom is a single mom, so she is living with her parents, and she has this. This is the only child, and so she is a bit paranoid about, and she says she's not scared of anything. She can jump from anywhere, and there's no sense of what's safe for her and what's not safe for her. So she's separated from the husband as soon as this little girl was born. So I thought there is something strong in the pregnancy history. But before that, I'd said, let's talk about the birth. And she said she's thumb sucked for about 4 or 5 years. So it's just, she's still thumb sucking. And she was breastfed for 4.5 years. So that's a very long period. Very early milestones. She talked at 14 months, and she said, I always wanted to be a very different mother. I didn't want to hit her or fight in front of her. And she is a very sensible adult companion, which I found quite interesting. Like, she's a 5-year-old, and the mom is talking to her as if she's a very sensible girl who understands things in life. She can sometimes feel left out if I don't talk on that level with her, and feels excluded. She has to feel included, in the family talk and things around what's happening. She has to know everything. The pregnancy history was quite stressful. Now, the husband was an alcoholic and not quite supportive, but she was in love with him. So she loved him a lot. But she never really wanted to have a baby. She said, I was quite content having him. And I was never really fond of babies. I was more of an animal lover. And throughout pregnancy, because of the drinking, she had these bad fights with the husband. But it stressed her because every time she fought, the baby moved faster. And she said, my dad was always, we were in the army, and army is a very small world. You're protected, you are secluded from the outside world. And she had this most upsetting moment when she had broken a previous engagement. So she was quite she wanted to get away from everything. She felt very guilty. The family was understanding, but she said, I would just want to be on my own. Now, this is not very common. So she stayed at an ashram of a spiritual guru for quite some time. She felt it was a safer place in some way before she felt through that grieving period. And she said, I like reading all this spiritual stuff. So that broke an engagement, and she never wanted to break this marriage, but it happened. So that was quite tense period for her. So she said, I like reading spiritual stuff where you are told not to get attached to anything, like the Vairagya. I'm very attached to my daughter, my parents, my brother. I emotionally depend on them, and I suffer when I'm alone. And this need to be loved and cared is very, very strong, because I can't exist if I lose this girl, because I've already lost a lot. So this was the way she coped with things. She gets very bad migraines whenever there's exposed to bright light or noise or cigarette smoking. So she was talking a bit about herself as well. Through the story of the child, her emotional state was also quite clear. Now, she has dreams of falling from a high place, fears of being in a closed room, of robbers pursuing her. She startles quite easily, and she has a strong fear of losing her daughter. She said, I'll be finished now. I can't take any more. If I lose her, I start to crying even on thinking about it. And she has this, she's again paranoid about, having her out of her sight and of child abuse. So basically that was the case. This is what the child state was. So this child is fearless, independent, very friendly, very engaging. She likes company. She can get along with anyone. Quite cheerful and lively, very courageous and confident, and very loquacious. And the mom was the exact opposite. She was really this quiet, mild lady, lots of fears, very introverted. It was really hard for her to talk about all these things in that one consult, but she knew she had to give it all because she wanted the child. I explained to her the need to understand her state, and I could see it was really hard for her to explain all that. So the interview went along for a long time, but this is just the gist of what's there. So there is this whole desire to be on her own. The way she coped with, just get on within the spiritual ashram and just be by herself, very serious. And she has never shared all these things to anyone before, apart from her very, very close friends. So this desire for solitude and aversion to people, she doesn't really mix and talk with a lot of people around her. And that was the mom. And this mother and child were completely poles apart. But there was a common connection somewhere. And this was this need. So this common connection was this need to be attached. This whole thing about being included and not being excluded, and this being sensible companions to each other. And this attachment is so close that you're completely dependent on it. You just cannot exist without the other. So that's the common hinge. But the way they're expressing is so different. The child's expressing it by going out and meeting people and kids and adults and young. It doesn't make a difference. And the mom goes inside her own self, staying away and being detached. So in order to not really feel the sadness anymore. And that was like this interesting spectrum, seeing in the mom and the child, and this common place from where it was coming from. So I think in constitutionally the expressions were really different. But there is this common hinge which connects these two sides of the constitution. And I think the correct so-called essence or constitutional remedy should have this common hinge. And then the rest will fall in place. Because if you miss that common hinge and you just look at the expressions, you can sometimes miss the expression. So the remedy which came up was natrum carbonicum. There is this desire for a very strong attachment with somebody at a one-to-one level. So if you read it from the soul of remedies, this is what is the sense of natrum carb. You read it from different books, we'll come to that later. So there's this very strong dependence on the relationship without which they feel really fearful and sad and isolated. Very sensitive to separating from loved ones and breaking the relationship. You look into Kent and you find there's just one side of the story there, which is very interesting. This is the story of the mum, which is more common in our books. Like the Kent says, estrangement from family and friends, aversion to mankind and society, relatives and strangers, and this great division between him and others. But if I had just fixed myself with one part of the story, I would have missed the other part of the child, because a lively, extroverted natrum carb wasn't very common. But the theme behind that was the same. So I gave the mom and the child the same remedy. Now in this case, the child came back after a month. That was the follow-up. 3 doses of natrum carb. And the patch disappeared within a month. Another thing is the physicals were also a part of the story. Natrum carb is a very strongly indicated remedy in vitiligo, but not just that. I found this polarity to be also true for the physical generals. Like say in the aversions and the cravings, natrum carb has exactly the same, the opposite of the aversion, the cravings. Like for example, it has an aversion to meat and a craving for sweets. So I found not to be fixated even with the aversions and the desires, because they can also change. What's important is the sweets or the meat or that particular food substance. So the aggravations and ameliorations from a food substance or the cravings and desires can also change constitutionally. But it remains fixed on that substance itself. So have a look in your own practice as well and see if that's what's happening as well. Because remember, sulfur has craving for sweets and aversion to sweets. And so do many remedies which are well proven. You find that they can be interchanged. So now this girl, I lost touch with her for about a few years after that. And then one day I got a call, I think about 5 or 6 years later, and mom said she's had a similar patch now on her cheek. She's been otherwise quite fine. So because they've moved to another city and changed schools, another place, obviously there was some stress there. So I said, let's give her the remedy which worked before, and if it doesn't, then we'll see if there is a change there. Repeated the dose and it cleared up the patch again, and she's well since there. And the last time I saw or heard from her mother was, I think, a couple of years back, which is like 10 years down the track. So she's not had any more patches, and she is a teenager now and has remained well since then. But I think this case taught me a lot about natrum carb, not just natrum carb, but about constitutional remedies and the way you can actually look for, the way you don't need to fix yourself with one constitutional, because it can really prejudice you. Try and look for the whole, the hinge behind this expression, and then you can find the deeper story and the deeper theme there. Thank you so much, and let me know what sort of approaches and what sort of, in your own practice, how do you define a constitution, and have you also found a similar pattern in your patients too? So thanks, and see you next time. Bye-bye.